A warrior's last stand smoke filled the sky of planet Varix. The war had ended, but not in peace. It ended in fire, betrayal, and blood. The once great cities of the warrior race now lay in ruins, among the broken metal and burning towers. A tall figure moved fast. She was wounded, her breathing heavy. Her body covered in scars and dust, but in her arms she carried something more important than her own life, her daughter. Her name was Sira, a commander of the Virex elite warriors. She had fought many battles, but this one was different. This time, she wasn't fighting to win a war. She was running to save her child. Her daughter Luma was only 6 cycles old. Too young to understand war, but old enough to cry in fear. A blast shook the ground behind them. The enemy drones had spotted her ship. They were getting closer. Sira reached the escape pod hidden beneath the rocks with trembling fingers. She activated it. There was only one place left to run a distant blue planet called Earth. She had heard it was peaceful, that humans were kind to the weak. But she didn't know if that was true. Still, she had no choice. As the escape pod launched into space, Sira held Luma close. "Stay strong, little star," she whispered. "We are not finished yet." The journey through space was rough. Their pod was damaged during re-entry. Alarms screamed as fire covered the outer shell, then crash. The pod slammed into the thick forests of northern Earth. Hidden deep in the mountains, it was night, cold and silent. Sira pushed open the hatch with one arm, her other arm bleeding badly. She stepped out, holding Luma close to her chest. The air was thick with trees and mist. She didn't know the language, the land, or the people. But she knew danger was still following above her in the distant sky. She saw faint red lights. Blinking enemy drones had tracked them here. They would find her soon. She could not run anymore. She could not fight anymore. She needed help. Her scanner picked up a life form not far from the crash site. It was human and alone. Living in a small house near the edge of the forest, the scanner showed former combat medic. High empathy. That was her only chance. Sira wrapped her daughter in a piece of thermal cloth. Her own feet dragging, she walked through the forest under moonlight. Every step was pain. Every breath was fire. But she did not stop. Finally, she reached a small wooden cabin, half buried in snow and silence. A yellow porch light glowed faintly. Her vision blurred as she moved toward the door. She raised her arm and knocked. Once, twice, then collapsed to her knees. She held Luma up in both arms and cried in a soft, broken voice. "Please, help my child." The door opened slowly. A tall man stood in the doorway, shocked. His name was Mark, a retired soldier who had seen too many wars. He was holding a flashlight and a hunting rifle, but dropped them both when he saw the alien. Woman and the child in her arms, Mark had never seen an alien this close. Her skin was faintly silver, her eyes glowing blue with tears. But she wasn't dangerous. She wasn't here to fight. She was begging. "Who? What are you?" he asked softly. Sira looked up, her body shaking, and whispered, "Mother." "I am just a mother." Mark didn't move for a moment. Then he looked at the child, pale and weak in her arms. He stepped outside, bent down, and gently touched the girl's forehead burning with fever. He sighed deeply, his voice low. "You picked the right door." He helped them inside. Sira almost fainted as she stepped into the warmth. Mark placed the child on the couch and grabbed his old medical bag. He didn't care where they came from. He only saw a child in need and a mother on the edge of death. Outside, above the forest, red lights blinked again. The enemy was near, but they didn't know that inside this quiet cabin, a new kind of story was beginning, one of courage, trust, and something rare between worlds. Hope. The human's dilemma. Mark sat beside the old fireplace, staring at the alien child lying on his couch. Her small body trembled under the blanket, her skin pale with fever. The alien mother, Sira, sat quietly nearby. Her head down, breathing slow and heavy. She had passed out twice during the night. And he had done his best to clean her wounds, but Mark was not a doctor anymore. He was just a man living alone in the forest, far from the world he once tried to protect. He didn't expect visitors, especially not a warrior alien mother and her dying child. This was not something he had trained for. Mark stood up and walked. To the window, he looked out at the trees, still and silent, but something didn't feel right. His soldier instincts whispered, "They're being hunted." He remembered her words, "Enemies followed me, Allah. They will come." She had said it in broken English, but the fear in her voice was clear. Mark had seen that fear before in soldiers running from battles. He knew it wasn't fake. He turned. Back to the room, Sira had opened her eyes slightly, her gaze watching him. He walked over and offered her a glass of water. She took it with shaky hands. "Thank you." "Human. I'm Mark," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You need rest. I need to protect her," Sira whispered, looking at her daughter. "She is all I have." Mark nodded. But questions burned inside him. "Why are you running? What happened to your world?" he asked gently. Sira was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke in low words. "My people were proud warriors, but our leaders became cruel. They turned against families, took children for war training. I escaped." She looked at Mark, her blue eyes filled with pain. "They will not stop until she is dead or taken back." Mark felt a tightness in his chest. He had once served in Earth's wars. He had seen innocent children suffer. He had buried friends who tried to save lives instead of taking them. He had left that life behind because he couldn't carry the weight anymore. But now, this was happening again right at his door. Mark walked to the kitchen, opened his old cabinet, and took out an old first aid kit. He returned to Sira and said, "I'll help." For tonight, Sira nodded weakly. One night, it's hope enough. Hours passed slowly. Mark gave Luma some earth medicine, crushed into warm water. She cried a little. But Sira held her close and hummed a soft alien song. Mark listened quietly, surprised at how gentle a warrior could sound. The child finally fell asleep, her breathing slow but peaceful. Mark sat across the room, cleaning his old tools. He remembered something: the girl's skin had small burns. Not from sickness, but from energy blasts. They were being hunted with real weapons, advanced tech. This wasn't just a crash. It was an escape from something big. He stood up and opened a wooden cabinet hidden under the floor. Inside were weapons, tools and gear from his army days. He had kept them in case of emergency, but never used them in years. Now, it felt like that emergency had arrived. He pulled out a small heat scanner. It beeped once, then twice. 2 red dots blinked faintly in the far end of the forest. Something or someone was out there, Mark whispered. Damn. She was right. He returned to Sira, who was now sitting up slowly. There are 2 drones near the edge of the woods, he said. Do you know how to hide your heat signatures? Sira nodded quickly. Yes, but not for long. She pulled out a small alien device from her belt, barely functioning. Broken, she said. Needs power. Mark opened his drawer and handed her an old battery. She stared at it, surprised. You understand tech? A little, he said. I used to patch up wounded soldiers and broken machines. She smiled faintly for the first time. Then maybe we survive. As night deepened, Mark placed thick blankets over the windows. He helped Sira hide the escape pod in the forest by covering it with snow and branches. Then, he built a small heat-blocking tent inside the basement, where Luma could stay hidden before going to rest. Mark sat down with Sira near the fire. Why did you come to Earth? He asked finally, There are other planets closer to Vorax. Sira's voice was soft, tired, but honest. Because I heard humans protect those who cannot fight. I wanted to believe. It was true. Mark looked at her for a long new rap. Mark looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "Maybe it still is." He stood up and walked toward the stairs. "You and your daughter can stay another night," he said. "But if your enemies come, we'll have to fight." Sira looked at her sleeping daughter, then back at the human who had offered help. "Then we fight together," she whispered. And in that moment, far away from their broken worlds, a soldier and a warrior mother made a silent promise to protect a child from the darkness coming closer. Hunted by shadows, snow fell slowly over the quiet forest. But beneath the silence, danger moved. 2 small drones floated above the tree line, scanning every heat source. There, red lights blinked like watching eyes. They had found traces, burn marks from the escape pod, small footprints in the snow. The hunt had begun. Inside the small wooden cabin, Mark checked his scanner again. The 2 red dots were closer, now within 400 meters. He took a deep breath, then turned to Sira, who sat near the sleeping child. "They're moving fast," he said. "They'll be here soon." Sira's body tensed. Her eyes glowed faintly under the dim light. She stood up and walked to the window. Her warrior instincts returning. "They hunt like beasts," she whispered. "Quiet, patient, deadly." Mark loaded his old rifle. "I've hunted too," he said. "But this time, I'm not hunting animals." Sira picked up her alien blaster, damage, but still working. She adjusted it and tested the charge. "Only 3 shots left," Mark noticed and said, "We need traps." Not just bullets, they moved quickly. Working together like 2 soldiers trained in different worlds, Mark placed noise-triggered cans along the trees. Sira used her last bit of tech to set a cloaking net near the main path. They used old wires, tools, broken furniture, anything that could delay the enemy. Back inside, they checked on Luma. The girl was still asleep, her fever going down slowly. Mark touched her forehead and whispered, "She's stronger than most adults I've seen." "She's my light," Sira replied softly. "She gave me a reason to live again." There was a pause. Then Mark asked, "What will you do after this?" Sira looked out the window. "If we survive, we find a place where no one chases us," she said. "Where my daughter can laugh and not hide." Mark nodded, but didn't speak. He had once dreamed of such a place too, before war had taken it away. Suddenly, a loud click echoed in the forest. One of the noise traps had gone off. Mark rushed to the door, peeking through his scope. 2 shadows moved between trees, tall, thin machines with red glowing sensors. "They're here," he whispered. Sira stood beside him, silent and still. Then she turned toward the basement and said, "Take her there." Mark carried Luma gently to the heat-blocking tent. The child opened her eyes slightly and whispered, "Mama?" Mark smiled. "She's right upstairs, and she's got a blaster." Luma smiled weakly, then went back to sleep. He returned to Sira, who was kneeling beside the door. Her blaster pointed at the trees. "I'll take the left," she said calmly. Mark nodded. "I'll cover the right." The first drone broke through the trees, fast and silent. Mark fired once, missing by inches. The drone shot back. A blast hit the wooden porch, tearing part of it apart. Sira rolled to the side and fired her blaster. Zap! The drone exploded in a burst of smoke and fire. The second drone circled wide. Scanning the house, it detected heat from the basement. Luma's location. Mark shouted, "It's heading to the back." Sira ran fast. Ignoring her pain, she jumped through the broken side door, landing near the snow-covered generator. The drone appeared from the side and fired. Sira dived behind a tree, then aimed carefully. She whispered, "For my daughter," and fired the second shot. Boom! The drone fell, its core melting into the snow, but part of its final blast hit Sierra's shoulder, sending her falling backward into the snow. Mark reached her within seconds. She was bleeding, but still conscious. "You okay?" he asked, lifting her carefully. Sierra nodded. Still breathing, they moved back into the cabin. Locking the doors again, Mark quickly wrapped her wound with gauze. "You saved us," he said. Sierra smiled faintly. "You helped me fight." Mark walked to the basement and checked on Luma. She was still asleep, unaware of how close death had come. He stood there for a while, watching the girl breathe softly. Then he whispered to himself, I won't let her grow up in fear." That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He sat near the fire, watching the flames dance. Sierra joined him later, holding her arm carefully. For the first time, she looked less like a warrior and more like a mother, tired, but still standing. Mark looked at her and said, "I don't know much about your world, but I've seen enough pain on mine. If you're serious about staying hidden here, I can help." Sierra looked at him in surprise. "You would do that?" "I have nothing else left," he said. "But maybe this is my new fight." She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You are not like the others," she said quietly. "Humans. They surprised me." And as the wind howled outside and snow continued to fall, two lost warriors sat in silence, knowing the hunt was not over, but now they were no longer alone. Truth in the darkness. The storm outside grew stronger. Winds howled through the trees like lost voices inside the small cabin. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls. Mark sat on the floor near the fireplace, checking his rifle one last time. Sierra leaned against the wall, holding her injured shoulder, her blaster now quiet and cold. Neither of them spoke for a while. Silence wrapped around them like a blanket, heavy but safe. Luma was sleeping in the basement, warm and hidden. Mark had brought her more blankets. Her small hand had reached out and grabbed his finger before she fell asleep again. It had shaken. Something inside him, something he thought was gone. Sierra noticed the look in his eyes. "You care for her," she said quietly. Mark didn't answer at first. Then he spoke, his voice low. "I lost a daughter." Sierra looked at him, surprised but gentle. "I didn't know," she said softly. Mark took a deep breath and looked at the fire. "Her name was Ella," he said. "She was 8 years old. She got sick. During a war, I was a combat medic, helping soldiers. But I couldn't help my own child." Sierra's eyes softened. Pain connected them now, not just survival or danger, but something deeper. "I tried everything," Mark continued. "Took her to every doctor, begged every official, but they said resources were limited. She wasn't a priority." His hands clenched. "They chose soldiers over children." He wiped his eyes quickly, hiding the tears that came without warning. "I left the army the day she died." He said, "I couldn't fight for a system that let her die." The fire cracked, filling the space between his words. Sierra watched him quietly, then stepped closer and sat beside him. Her voice was calm but heavy. "I was a soldier too. The best in my unit." She looked at her hands, strong, scarred, but shaking now. "They trained us to be weapons, not mothers. When I had Luma, they told me to send her to the warrior school, start her training at 2 cycles. Old Mark looked at her in disbelief. 2 years old. "That's insane." Sierra nodded. "I refused. They called me a traitor. I ran. And they followed. My own commanders wanted my daughter taken and my name erased." Mark sat back, absorbing her words. "You risked everything just to keep her safe." "I had no choice," she said. "She is not a weapon. She is my child." A silence settled again, but this time it felt different, warmer, fuller. 2 broken warriors, sitting in a small cabin at the edge of the galaxy, sharing stories of loss, pain, and choices that changed their lives. Sierra reached into a small pouch at her side and pulled out a silver necklace. It wasn't shiny or beautiful, but it held a glowing blue stone. She handed it to Mark. "This is from my home," she said. "It glows brighter near truth." Mark looked at it carefully, then placed it on the table. It glowed softly between them, casting a calming light. "Seems it trusts me," he said with a half smile. "It does," she replied. "And so do I." For the first time, Mark truly believed her not just as an alien, but as a mother. He had seen her fight, suffer, protect, and even cry. She wasn't here to invade Earth or cause war. She was just looking for a future for her child. Outside, snow kept falling, covering the broken trees and old footprints. Mark walked to the window and watched the sky. "I think more will come," he said. "Drones, soldiers, maybe even ships." Sierra stood beside him, her face strong again. "Then we prepare," she said. "I've been running too long. It's time to stand." Mark turned to her. "You're injured, low on weapons, and far from home. You sure you're ready for this?" She nodded. "With you." "Yes." Mark smiled faintly. "Then we're a team." She held out her hand, not in peace, but in partnership. He shook it. Firm and respectful. Two warriors. One mission: protect the child, no matter what. Later that night, as they checked supplies and shared food, Sierra asked, "Why did you live out here, in the middle of nowhere?" Mark thought for a second, then said, "I came here to forget, but now, I think I was waiting." Sierra looked at him curiously. "Waiting for what?" He looked down the stairs toward the basement. "For a second chance," he said, "and maybe this is it." And deep in the basement, under warm blankets and soft light, Luma stirred in her sleep and smiled, as if she knew that the darkness was not winning tonight. Not anymore. Enemies at the door. It was just before sunrise when the peace broke again. The forest was still dark, and a thin mist hung low over the ground. But Mark's motion detector flashed red. He rubbed his eyes, stared at the screen, and whispered, "They're back. 3 dots now. Not 2. Bigger, faster, and closer than before. Drones weren't just scouting, they were attacking. And they weren't alone this time. 1 dot was larger than the others, moving like a ground unit. Mark's heart raced. "Soldiers," he muttered. "They've sent a real hunter." He turned to Sierra, who was already suiting up. Her shoulders still hurt, but her movements were sharp and ready. "I knew they wouldn't stop," she said, loading her blaster with her final power cell. "But I didn't expect them so soon. We don't have much time," Mark said. Grabbing his rifle and setting traps near the windows, he glanced at the basement door, where little Luma still slept. "We have to keep her safe, no matter what." Sierra looked at him, her eyes cold with determination. "I won't let them touch her," she said, "even if it means my life." Mark nodded. "Let's make them regret coming here." Outside, the enemy arrived. 2 flying drones hovered above the trees, while a larger, insect-like machine stomped through the snow. Its legs were sharp, its eyes red, and its scanner buzzing loudly. It was a tracker, programmed to find runaways and destroy anything in its path. The first drone launched a flare into the air, lighting up the cabin. Inside, Mark flinched. "They're trying to blind us," he said. Sierra closed the window shutters and activated a cloaking field, just enough to hide their heat for a short time. Then the house shook. Boom. The tracker had fired a warning shot, hitting the edge of the porch, sending wood flying through the air. Sierra and Mark ducked, both holding weapons tight. "They want to break the house down," Mark said. "Not just find us, send us." "Then we fight back," Sierra growled. Standing beside him, she pressed a button on her belt, activating the last defense field she had left. It would give them 20 minutes, no more. The battle began. Mark opened fire through a side window, hitting one drone in the wing. It spun out of control and exploded mid-air. The second drone responded fast, sending shock pulses through the roof. Sierra aimed her blaster from the front door and shot it down with a clean blast, her aim perfect despite her wound. But the real danger was the tracker. It crashed through the trees like a giant spider, its legs smashed through the snow, and its core glowed red-hot Mark through a homemade explosive under its feet boom. But it barely stumbled. This thing's armored, he shouted. Sierra jumped out the back door and fired her last shot directly into the tracker's sensor eye. Sparks flew and the machine screamed, spinning wildly. But it wasn't down yet. Instead, it charged toward the cabin, its laser arms cutting through trees as it came. Mark grabbed a large EMP device from his bunker, a risky weapon. Very old, unstable. He looked at Sierra. If I get close enough, I can shut it down. You'll get killed. She snapped. It'll detect your heat instantly. I'm not asking for permission. Mark said, already moving. Sierra paused, then ran after him. If you're going to be crazy, I'm coming with you. They raced through the snow, dodging energy blasts, jumping over broken logs. The tracker chased them, but the forest slowed it down. Mark got close enough and threw the EMP grenade under its core. The device beeped once, twice, then bang. A pulse of blue light spread across the area. The tracker froze mid-step. Sparks flying from its legs, then collapsed with a loud metallic scream. It hit the ground like a dying beast, its systems dead. But the blast had thrown Mark across the snow. He hit a rock hard, falling unconscious. Sierra crawled to him, panicked. Mark, open your eyes, she cried, shaking him. Blood ran from his head, but his chest moved slowly. He was alive. She carried him back to the cabin. Every step a struggle, she had no strength left. But she wouldn't stop, not now, inside the cabin. Luma had woken up, her eyes wide with fear. But when she saw her mother carrying Mark, she ran to help. The child wrapped blankets around his body. Copying what Mark had done for her days ago, tears rolled down her cheeks. Don't let him go, she whispered. Sierra held Mark's hand and looked at the sky through the window. Smoke still rose from the destroyed machines. But for now, the forest was quiet again. She leaned close to him and whispered, You saved us. Now it's my turn to save you. And in the dark corner of Earth, far from stars and battleships, a human and an alien mother fought together. Not for glory, not for power, but for a child's tomorrow. And that made them stronger than any army. Chasing them, the price of kindness. The cabin smelled of burned metal and old wood. Smoke from the broken machines still floated through the air. Mark lay unconscious on the couch, a thick bandage around his head. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a reminder that he had survived, but barely. Sierra sat beside him, her body aching, her arm trembling with pain. But she didn't care about her wounds anymore. Her full focus was on the human who had saved her daughter. Again and again, he had risked everything for them. He had no reason to, and yet, he did. Luma sat near Mark's feet, her small hands holding a warm cloth. She looked at her mother and whispered, Will he wake up? Sierra gently brushed the girl's hair. Yes, she said softly, but we must help him now. Sierra stood slowly and walked to the corner of the room. She opened her bag and pulled out a small silver box. Inside was alien medical tech, very old, very limited, but still functional. She opened the scanner and ran it over Mark's body. A hologram appeared, showing bleeding in the head, mild brain swelling, and 2 fractured ribs. He saved us, she whispered to herself. Now I save him. She placed a healing patch on his chest, one that used nanotech to speed up tissue repair. Then she injected a small energy booster into his neck. Mark didn't move, but his breathing grew steadier. His color slowly returned. Sierra sat back and watched him. Memories of her own past returned when she was once treated like a tool, when no one had cared if she lived or died. And now here she was, caring for someone who wasn't even her kind. She had seen cruelty in war, betrayal in her own people, but kindness. She had forgotten what it looked like until now. Mark groaned slightly, his hand twitching. Sierra leaned forward quickly. "Mark, can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Then clearer. He blinked, tried to sit up, but gasped in pain. Sierra placed a hand on his chest. "Don't move." "Not yet." Mark coughed once, then looked around. Is she okay?" Sierra smiled. Faintly, "Luma is safe." At that moment, the little girl ran to him and hugged his arm. "Thank you," she said in her small voice. "You're my hero." Mark gave a weak smile. "You're stronger than me, kid," Luma giggled, then said something quietly in her alien tongue. Sierra's eyes widened slightly. Mark looked confused. What did she say? Sierra touched his arm gently. "She called you Papa." Mark froze, emotions crashing into him like a wave. He hadn't heard that word not for years. His chest tightened, not from pain, but from something deeper. He looked at Luma, her eyes glowing with warmth and trust, a child who had lost everything, and yet found comfort in him. "I'm not sure I deserve that," he said softly. Sierra replied, "You do." The next few days passed slowly. Mark stayed in bed most of the time, healing from his wounds. Sierra cooked simple food using earth supplies and her own protein rations. Luma stayed close to both of them, drawing pictures on old paper and singing soft songs from her world. The cabin, once quiet and cold, now felt alive. Mark watched Sierra train in the yard when she wasn't inside. Even hurt, she moved like a warrior, sharp, fast, focused. But now he also saw something else in her peace, even if small. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Mark sat beside her near the porch. "Why did you trust me?" he asked. "Suddenly, you had no reason to. I could have handed you over." Sierra didn't answer right away. She stared at the sky, then said, "I saw the way you looked at her. Not with fear, not with anger, just care." She paused. "And no one in my world looks at children like that anymore." Mark nodded slowly. "We forget what matters during war." Sierra looked at him. "You remembered that night." Luma curled up in a blanket between them, sleeping peacefully. Mark looked at her and whispered, "She's not just your future. She might be mine too." Sierra didn't speak, but her fingers gently touched his hand. For a second, no words were needed. The fire crackled softly. The wind outside was calm, and inside the cabin, something stronger than fear had grown family. But far away, in the silent orbit above Earth, a signal blinked on an alien ship's console. Tracker destroyed. Target alive. Location confirmed. Another enemy had just received their position, and this time they weren't sending drones. They were coming in person. Hope under new skies, the stars above the forest twinkled quietly. But far beyond them, danger moved fast. An alien warship entered Earth's upper orbit, silent, black, and deadly inside. Commanders reviewed the last message from the tracker. Target alive, coordinates locked. Prepare for retrieval. This time, they weren't sending machines. They were sending warriors, trained, armed, and ready to take back what they believed was theirs. Sierra and her daughter, back on Earth. The forest was peaceful again. Mark had started walking without pain, his ribs still sore but healing. Sierra stood near the edge of the woods. Watching the sky, her senses were alert, her hand resting on her blaster, even though it was out of charge. She felt it in the air. Something was coming. Luma played near the fire pit with a stick, drawing circles in the dirt. She hummed a song softly, something she had learned from both her worlds now, a little alien melody. With human rhythm, Mark joined Sarah by the trees, holding a small cup of coffee. You feel it too, don't you? He asked. Sira nodded slowly. They will not stop. They know where we are now. Mark sipped quietly, then said, We've come too far to run. Sira looked at him. Her voice steady. Then we stay, and we protect her. He nodded. To the end. That night, they prepared for one last fight. Mark rewired the house with old traps and EMP lines. Sira sharpened blades and taught Mark how to use her people's combat style. They were different, but together they were strong. Not just a fighters, but a team, a family. Luma watched them quietly. And when Sira bent down to check her coat, she asked, Mama, why do they want us? Sira paused, thinking of the right words, because we chose love over orders. She said, and that scares them. Luma didn't fully understand, but she nodded. I'm not scared. She said bravely, you and Papa are here. Sira's eyes watered, but she smiled. Yes, little star. We are then. The sky flashed silent but bright. A blue light streaked across the trees and touched down beyond the mountain. The enemy had landed. Sira turned to Mark, her voice sharp. We don't wait this time, he agreed. We take. The fight to them, at dawn, Sira and Mark moved through the forest. They had tracked the landing signal to an open clearing. There, 3 enemy warriors stood tall, armored, and scanning the area. Sira took a deep breath and stepped into view. This is where it ends, she said loudly. The commander looked up, surprised. Sira, but you're still alive. I'm more than alive, she replied. I'm free. Mark stepped beside her, holding his rifle steady. And she's not alone, he said firmly. The enemy commander raised his weapon. That child belongs to us. No, Sira growled. She belongs to no one but herself. With no more words, the battle began. Sira and Mark moved fast like one mind in 2 bodies. They used trees for cover, snow to mask sound, traps to confuse their enemy. The first alien fell into a snare and was knocked out by a flying branch trap Mark had built. The second was disarmed by Sira and sent rolling down a hill with a broken arm. Only the commander remained fast, angry and deadly. He charged at Mark with a blade. But Sira blocked him. Their blades clashed in sparks. Old training against freedom. Sira's shoulder bled again. But she kept moving at the final moment. She shouted to Mark, now? Mark fired a direct EMP burst into the commander's chest. The armor short-circuited. And the enemy collapsed, unconscious. It was over. Hours later, Mark and Sira returned to the cabin, tired but alive. Luma ran out and hugged them both. You came back, she said with joy. Sira knelt down and hugged her tight. We always will. Mark smiled. No one's taking you from us. They buried the enemy ship's tech, hid the unconscious warriors far from their home. The forest returned to peace once more. In the days that followed, life grew warmer. Mark built a better shelter underground for emergencies. Sira taught Luma how to survive in both worlds. Mark gave her human stories, while Sira gave her warrior wisdom. Together, they raised a child who laughed more and feared less. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Sira stood beside Mark on the porch. Do you think Earth will accept us? She asked softly. Mark looked at her, then at Luma playing nearby. I don't care if they do. He said, we already accepted each other. Sira smiled, the weight of war finally lifting from her shoulders. You gave me more than safety, she whispered. You gave me a home. He took her hand gently. You gave me a reason to hope again. Above them, the stars sparkled under a clear sky. No warships. No dangers, the quiet breath of a new beginning. And in a small cabin, deep in the woods, a warrior mother, a human protector, and a brave little girl found peace not in the stars, but under new skies.